Hi, good afternoon. I think you can see my screen. Is it visible? Please tell it yes if it is
Yes, sir,
visible.
it's visible.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
okay. So this is one of the problem with this Google Classroom. Once start sharing your screen, then some of the things are not visible in the full view. Anyway, so as you know that this is the course Applied Linguistics, and still we're in our unit 1, which is mainly introduction, what is applied linguistics, definitions, little bit of history, and other things. And so we'll be discussing about this, let's say in 3 or 4 classes, and then we'll move on to our next unit. And the last 2 classes we had more like general kind of introduction, and I think in the last class I got somewhere around 15 to 20 minutes, and I tried to talk about what is applied linguistics, some of the definitions. So today, what I plan to do, let's say briefly, I'll talk about what is applied linguistics. So I prepared a PPT, so that's the PPT I'm sharing with you. So, and this is the quick overview of today's lecture. Uh, so, what is applied linguistics? So, we'll try to talk about the definitions of applied linguistics, and some of these definitions I think I have already told you in the last class. But let's say, even if you could not understand or could not grasp the concept, again, little bit of elaboration and explanation today. Okay. So, what is applied linguistics? Definitions, ostensible definitions, and some people have taken the extreme positions of applied linguistics, and commonly held view of applied linguistics. And we also tried to discuss in the last class that what is the source when you're talking about applied linguistics, what is the source and what is the target of applied linguistics. Okay. And I think I also told you in the last class something like what is the narrow interpretation and what is the broad interpretation of applied linguistics. And so, is it only linguistics which is being applied, or not only linguistics? There are some other things that are also applied. Okay, so I think I tried to talk about that part as well in the last class, and then what we need to do, let's say, as an applied linguist or practitioner of applied linguistics, what kind of position we should take. So we talked about Bramfit's position, that kind of compromise positions, and also try to give you a working definition of applied linguistics in the last class. Okay, so quickly we'll see all these definitions, the survey of applied linguistics, and what the practitioners of applied linguistics they say about applied linguistics. Okay, and next, we'll try to see that the kind of input applied linguistics, gets from theoretical linguistics, and try to see that the kind of distinction between theoretical linguistics and applied linguistics. Okay, and there was a time, especially initially, let's say after somewhere around after 1960s, and even after 1970s or 80s, many people they made a distinction between linguistics applied and applied linguistics. And Alan Davis is one of them, and many of them, let's say, many practitioners. So they said linguistics applied and applied linguistics. There has to be a kind of distinction. But later on, after 1980s, we have felt that there is no need for such distinction, distinction or that kind of differences, And Alan Davis, in his book himself, talked about that. So that part as well, I'll try to, present you regarding that. Okay, and now this is where the definition. I think the last class I was telling you that, and I think you have already read this that book. I told you, I think many times, that please do read Guy Cook chapter 1 and chapter 2, and so this is in chapter 1, I think page number 5, if you read, that's what Guy Cook says, that applied linguistics is something like it's concerned with the relation of knowledge about language to decision making in the real world. So, relation of knowledge about language to decision making in the real world. Okay, so this is where one of the definition is given by Guy Cook. And Vivian Cook says that applied linguistics means many things to many people. Now, if you say that something, one discipline or particular subject, if it means many things to many people. So, as a result, there would be lots of kind of disagreement. There will be no consensus. So, as a result. So we do not know what kind of, so there will be different kind of problems. Either it's a definitional problem or other problems, direction or scope or many other things. Like, so what to do, what not to do in applied linguistics. So if you think that this is this, and someone else will think that this is this or something like this. So and we had seen as well that talking about applied linguistics. There are different fields. Many people they agree that applied linguistics should be something like this or should be something like that. Okay. So anyway, so Kaplan Widoson says that it's applied linguistics is something like a mediation between theory and practice. It's a mediation between theory and practice. And Hudson says that it's a synthesis of research from a variety of disciplines, including linguistics. Try to understand this how. And now it is changing. Earlier it was only linguistics which is being applied. Now the kind of definition which is given by Hudson, 1999, it says that a synthesis of research from a variety of disciplines, including linguistics. Okay, so in linguistics is also included. Earlier it was only linguistics, and that was the very beginning also. Even if you are talking about the onset. Somewhere around 1940s and 1950s, mainly linguistics were being applied earlier, and so 1999 we have moved so far, and at least 50 years or more than 50 years, and I think I told you that how this field had changed, so to say, within 50 or 60 years. It started with language teaching, and slowly and gradually we have expanded our horizon. And applied linguists, started working on different issues, different things, and so now.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, some people are about to join. Will you please let them in? They're trying
That's
to join.
okay. That's the problem. You see, let's say, anyways, if you start your PPT presentation, PowerPoint presentation, then again I have to go back. Anyway, I'm just
Thank you, sir.
ending the show, and then let's say I'll tell them to join. Only one person. If anyone is there, otherwise it's very difficult. That's the problem with Google Classroom, as well as if you start the screen share, screen sharing, and not only screen sharing, this PowerPoint, the full PPT view, then you cannot see the other part of the screen. Even your own photo and other people, the screen, it's not visible. So that's the problem. So so only one person is here. Just tell them if anyone is left. Anyone is left, I will accept. Otherwise, I have accepted one person. Okay. Anyway, so please join in the next class if you would like to attend the class. So please join at least before 4 to 5. Anyway, so. Okay, so to continue our discussion, so what we are saying that it's quarter, pit quarter says that it presupposes linguistics, and one cannot apply what one does not know. So it presupposes linguistics, and this try to look at the year also, 1973. Uh, Somewhere applied linguistics were expanding that time. So, so we have to have linguistic knowledge if you're talking about applied linguistics. So let's say someone is working on language education, or let's say psychological, or maybe language disorder things, and not aware about linguistics and all. So we may not say that he is applied linguistics, he or she is applied linguist, So it presupposes linguistics. So one cannot apply what one doesn't know. So that's what Corder. And Rampton, it is understood as an open field in which those inhabiting or passing through simply show a common commitment to the potential value of dialogue with people who are different. So it's understood as an open field, and that's what we had also seen that how different things, different subdisciplines came into picture and merged into applied linguistics. There are lots of exchanges took place here. Okay, so now these are some of the definitions. Again, I think I told you in the last class that the kind of broad kind of view of applied linguistics, and so this is where Rampton said that if you want to know about applied linguistics, look around you. So look around you, somewhere language at the center or core of human lives or human existence. So wherever you see, and language is everywhere. I think I told you it is ubiquitous in nature. So whichever the issues you are talking about, whether it's a political issues, educational issues, policy matter, language policy, language endangerment. There are many other things. Let's say, even if you're talking about the way I'm talking, let's say, looking at, or maybe hearing my voice, you can have a kind of attitude or kind of a perception about me or my identity. Let's say, whichever the identity is, a political identity and other types of identity. So there are many things going on. We're talking about language, and not only that. Let's say, if you are interested more deeply, trying to know how the language is being processed, also, let's say. Whether it's the comprehension part or the production part, and there are many other things. Let's say we look into, and the people who work in the area of neurolinguistics, for that matter. Let's say neurolinguistics, for that matter, and they try to access all those neurons or neural networks. How this comprehension is taking place, how the production is taking place, and there are many other things. So that's what I'm saying. Language at the center, the core of human life or of human existence. You see, and so it is very difficult to imagine our life, without language. So it's very difficult for us. Let's say, though it is online lecture, just think about you that for you. You haven't talked to a single person for more than 2 or 3 days. Your life would be, in a different. You must be living in a different world. I remember many people who joins the different kind of meditation, especially in Buddhist tradition. There is a meditation. Things is being practiced. So you have to go there, and at least whether it's a 15 days course or maybe 1 month course, and you cannot talk to people, and so something like, so without language, as if like we cannot think of our life, even at sleep also. While sleeping also, I think maybe at the time of a dream also, I think we talk. And if even not in our dream, if nobody is present, we talk to our pets. We talk to our dogs, cats. And so I think, I don't know whether you remember those Lady Macbeth. That famous Macbeth, Lady Macbeth. She has, both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth committed that crime, killing King Duncan. and after that, Lady Macbeth is saying that, uh, like especially the stain, the blood, scent of Arabia even cannot remove the this stain, this stain of the blood, something like that. What I'm saying is that so even sleep at the time of sleep also we talk. There is monologue, there is dialogue, there are lots of things are going on. So language at the core, at the center, so that's what Ramton, taking the very general broad interpretation of applied linguistics, is something like, if you want to know about applied linguistics, look around you. Language at the center, at the core of human existence. So wherever language, applied linguistics, our applied linguists or practitioners of applied linguistics can give their practical solutions or something, So now, now, if you have that kind of broad interpretation about applied linguistics, and it is very difficult, as I told you, and so they offer no help in constructing introductory syllabuses in applied linguistics. So there is no guideline also. If you say that this is this and this is that, and especially in academics, you have to have a guideline. Let's say you are doing linguistics, and you have to have certain guidelines like what you are doing, and also let's say in our centers, some of the courses we teach you. So there has to be a kind of syllabus, guidelines or something. So if you say have that kind of broad interpretation, very general kind of view of applied linguistics. So as a result, what is happening is that you have no direction as such. You see, so so and so they lack clarity, especially. So now. So ostensible definitions. So there are many people. They say that we should have applied linguistics. They talk about applied linguistics, and but we should have a direction. It's not like that we're going into this place or that place, or so we should have a direction. Especially Widdowson and Guy Cook also talks about that kind of direction in applied linguistics. I'll talk about Guy Cook. But before that, I think Spolsky and so definition of a field can reasonably be explored by looking at the professionals involved in its study. So Spolsky says that so how do we know that this is applied linguistics? So he says that why not look at the professionals involved in its study? So whoever the professionals involved. So applied linguistics is a cover term for a sizable group of semi-autonomous disciplines, each dividing its percentages and allegiances between the formal study of language and other relevant fields, and each working to develop its own methodologies and principles. So this is where Spolsky, 2005, it's a cover term for a sizable group of semi-autonomous disciplines, okay? And so each working on its own kind of principles. Robert Kaplan, this is editor of Annual Review of Applied Linguistics. So, what is saying that has long been concerned about the status of applied linguistics, convinced that what it had to offer was not always understood or valued. So people could not understand, mainly what applied linguistics wanted to offer. So that's what one of the concern Robert Kaplan is raising. Okay, now this is where the position more like direction, what applied linguistics should be. So Widdowson, Guy Cook, and others, so Widdowson argues strongly for the coherence of applied linguistics, dismissing all as illogical commonly held view that applied linguistics is a gallimaufry, a coming together in an ad hoc way of different disciplines. It's not kind of gallimaufry, kind of in a jamboree kind of way, think people are coming or practitioners are coming and telling that this is applied linguistics, this is the thing you need to do. So rather Widdowson, Guy Cook say that yes, uh, you have to have a direction, especially in applied linguistics. So the Cook, Guy Cook, agrees with Woodson and says that the task of applied linguistics is to mediate between linguistics and language use. So it's mediate between linguistics and language use. So this is Guy Cook, 2003, and that's the definition. I think I have already used this definition earlier, page number 5 earlier. So Guy Cook defines applied linguistics as academic discipline concerned with the relation of knowledge about language to decision making in the real world. So this is already I have specified and mentioned to you. This is so he recognizes that the scope of applied linguistics remains rather vague, but attempts to delimit its main areas of concern as consisting of language and education, language, work and law, and language information and effect. So if you have read this chapter 1, and then you are aware of that this is the I think heading. This is 3 main headings, and within these 3 main headings there are some other sub-disciplines um, uh, are mentioned there, and I think in the next class maybe we'll talk about which are the sub-disciplines are mentioned there by Guy Cook. Now, Pennycook and so Pennycook, that kind of broad interpretation. So, extinct position, what we are talking about, that language is everywhere. Applied linguistics is the science of everything. So, we should not have that kind of view that applied linguistics is the science of everything, wherever language is. So, the practitioner of, let's say, practitioners of applied linguistics, they can give you that kind of practical solutions. So we should not have that kind of approach in our mind. If somebody has that kind of approach in mind, so rather we say that this is a myth. So language is everywhere. Applied linguistics is the science of everything. See, in my understanding, this could be considered as a myth. So but somehow what we have seen that after mainly after 2000, the way applied linguistics have moved, and these are some of the areas if you look into applied linguistics. And this is the extreme position, and this is the field also, critical applied linguistics. Within applied linguistics, we have a field like critical applied linguistics. So it opens up a whole new area of questions and concerns, issues such as identity, sexuality, access, ethics, disparity, differences, desire, or the reproduction of otherness. Otherness, mainly in Indians context, we can talk about otherness here. Or let's say the subaltern, and so the Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak and others, mainly the whole literature, Dalit literature, even if you are interested. So, how this otherness is being perceived by so to say the mainstream, and how this otherness is being perceived by, so to say, by the others, let's say, or by themselves. In my understanding, by themselves, I'm saying that it's how the Dalits, they have understood themselves. So in different writings, if you look at now, it is really interesting, the Dalit discourse, and not now, but let's say in the next semester, I'll be offering you a course, either discourse analysis or stylistics. Then I introduce this thing mainly. So what I'm saying is that taking the extreme position of critical applied linguistics, there are many things are discussed in applied linguistics as well. So these are some of the questions: identity, sexuality, access, ethics, disparity, differences, even politics, for that matter. Let's say political speeches of different whoever the political leaders, prime ministers, and all. So we have looked into all that kind of things. You see, and in discourse analysis we look into, and even in critical applied linguistics we also look into this. Okay, so the reproduction of otherness that have hitherto not been considered as concern related to applied linguistics, So, but Pennycook will say that yes, we should take into all these things, and there are many people now working in this direction, and critical applied linguistics are looking into this. Okay, so that's the extreme position, and so now, briefly we understood, looking at the definition, what is applied linguistics, and so what we have understood so far is that what is its source and what exactly has been applied. Mainly, if you're talking about the source, is basically the linguistics, let's say, or the language-related thing, and so. And I think I told you regarding the narrow interpretation. So narrow interpretation of applied linguistics, what is being applied is only linguistics. So linguistics deals with idealization. It can say very little about language-related problems of the real world. And that's what we had seen, that if you are talking about linguistics, linguistic study mainly focuses on the formal study of language. Formal study of language, idealization are more like in the abstract system, and the whole genetic traditions we look at. So the whole genetic traditions have ignored this phenomena of language use, and applied linguistics are more into language use, not the formal studies of language, but rather the functional studies of language, language use. So so if you say narrow interpretation, so what is being applied is only linguistics. So and linguistics, if you're talking about linguistics in general, it's mainly the abstraction, the whole tradition, of linguistic tradition. Since it's very narrow, so we have a very narrow kind of interpretation of applied linguistics. On the other hand, broad interpretation, as I already told you, that it must concern itself with everything to do with language. So, so it must concern itself with everything to do with language, and so something like now, if you're talking about applied linguistics and talking about the source and target, as I was telling you, so the target clearly cannot be anything and everything to do with language. Coder, Pit Coder, and I think I already told you also that he started with language teaching, and Pit Coder and many other people in the initial time, and so language teaching, speech therapy, mainly this language disorder, aphasia, dyslexia, and other language-related disorders, translation and language planning, So this is where this Pitcorder and so Brumfit. So working definition of applied linguistics will then be the theoretical and empirical investigation of real-world problems in which language is a central issue. So the theoretical and empirical investigation of real-world problems in which language is a central issue. So you have to have a theoretical as well as empirical investigation and of real-world problems in which language is a central issue. So real-world problems. So to talk about real-world problems is basically we're looking at the language use. Not mainly looking at the formal aspects of the language, but the functional aspects of the language. Okay, and now, linguistics, and moving to the next, linguistics and applied linguistics and its relationship, and let's say, and now I think I told you just 2 or 3 minutes before that if you are talking about linguistics, and in the even in the first class, I was telling you that what is linguistics, and our understanding of linguistics is that linguistics is the scientific study of language, or scientific study of human language, for that matter. Okay, so scientific study of human language, and or a study of language in general. And now, if you look at the whole tradition of linguistic traditions, you see, and and especially after 1950s, if we are talking about uh, emergence of generative grammar, and as a result, what happened? If you're aware of, about the, especially the history of linguistics, that the whole uh, other aspects of language use was totally ignored by this generative tradition. So by the generative tradition, so their concern was more like total abstract realization of language. If you look at this generative models, so to say, Chomskyan transformational generative models, it's a whole abstract idealization of language. You see, so and somewhere, even if you are talking about the way data and other things were collected, they were not really interested in the real data, but rather they were interested in the mind or brain. They are talking about intuition for that matter. So, what is the source of data? Chomsky and the followers of generative tradition, they will say that, yeah, it's basically intuition. So um, it's so this is really interesting, and how slowly and gradually that generative tradition, though still it's very influential tradition, but people started working on language use. So I'll just simply tell you that. So if you're talking about linguistics, so this is where that kind of understanding we do have. So the study of language in general, the generalities underlying actual appearances and abstract idealization of language rather than the way it is idealized in the real world. So they are not mainly looking at the real world, but rather going into some kind of intuitive level, and trying to make a generalized theory on the basis of whichever the data. And okay, so this is where, and now if you look at the schools, especially linguistics, so there are mainly two dominant schools. One is the formal school, and another is the functional school. So formal schools, which is mainly the idealization of language, abstract idealization of language, and here the Chomskyan whole generative school will come into picture, the formal schools, and the functional schools, and this is really interesting at times, since you're very, in the beginning level, may not be aware of that kind of distinction, what is formalist tradition, what is functionalist traditions, but somewhere, so the whole generative school, which is the formalist traditions, and so this formalist traditions, let's say, dominated dominated linguistics or linguistic tradition, and they themselves at times, these formalists, they think of themselves as if like they are the one, they know linguistics, and their formalist thoughts dominate, and language use is ignored, and language use is ignored, and formal and functionalist for that matter is often looked down upon, and there are many people who kind of try to make a synthesis between these two schools, formal schools and functionalist schools. Um, there are many. John and Nichols is one of the person. And at times, what happens? They have their own ego. So formalist, they don't talk to the functionalist, and functionalist, they don't talk to the formalist. So so John and Nichols, one of the person, really interesting. If you are interested to know about this tradition, formalist and functionalist tradition. Says this one article says that, why don't you talk to each other? So this is the title name of the paper, and one of our colleague from our department itself, Professor Pramod Kumar Pandey, he himself formalist, but at the same time he takes that functionalist approach as well. So tries to talk about the synthesis of this formalist and functionalist traditions. So what happened? Mainly the formalist schools. So this strong tradition, the generative schools or generative linguistics, and Chomsky, we are talking about. So Chomsky's The Syntactic Structures, 1957, and let's say then after that the whole book, and not only one book. If you're talking about syntactic structures, then followed by syntactic structure, you have standard theory, extended standard theory, and then let's say principles and parameters, which came somewhere around in 1980s, and then latest 1995, minimalist program, so the whole this and uh, genetic grammar, so the main understanding of this generative school, if you have little understanding, is that the representation of language is somewhere in the mind. If you know this distinction, mainly the competence and performance, so you must have simply grasped the concept that competence is something like what you know about a particular language. That is competence. Yes, definitely, that is competence. And the performance is basically the way in which people actually use language in everyday life. So for the whole generative schools we're talking about, they do not give importance to performance. So for them, what is important? For them, important is competence. So we need to study competence, not performance. But if you look at, let's say, and for us, how do you judge competence? It's basically through performance. It's basically through performance, let's say. So, and that's what the whole case of language use. If you're talking about, let's say, today I'm talking to you. It's basically I'm performing. Maybe I know better. I know better. But how do you judge me? Depending on my performance, definitely. Isn't the case? Or let's say you know many things, but if I ask you a question, you could not answer a simple questions. Maybe you know, but talking about the grading and other things, how I'm going to grade you? Definitely on the basis of the performance. So the whole thing, what is happening here, the competence part is basically given importance in the whole generative schools. The performance part is not given importance, and so I think this part, if you understand. So, and another premise of whole this generative school is that language is essentially biological rather than a social construct. This is try to understand this the premise, and then so language is essentially biological, so rather than a social construct, and so it talks about this whatever the kind of mind brain. So they give too much importance to intuition, and on the basis of that, they try to come up with an kind of a grammatical model which is totally abstract. And if you read syntactic structures, not only syntactic structures, standard theory, extended standard theory, and principal parameters, and minimalist programs and all other things, what is happening? You have a kind of abstract model of a grammar, totally abstract model of a grammar. So and that's why they project it in such a way. Let's say, and that's what the even the definition of grammar for Chomsky is that grammar is what? Grammar is a system of rules. It's a system of rules, and system of rules, and only finite set of rules. By the use of finite set of rules, you can create infinite set of number of sentences or whatever words and whatever the things for that matter. So the whole concept of language has been taken into in such a way as it is a computer program. Language itself is a kind of computer program, So it's a totally highly abstract model, and so in this formalist traditions, if you try to grasp this concept in this formalist tradition, what is happening as a result? So the whole case of language use, the functionalist things are being ignored. So that's what I was saying. So this is where a little bit of Chomsky and what kind of premises, let's say, in the formalist schools. I'll come back to this once I talk about, let's say, especially this Chomskyan tradition. as well as the concepts of grammar, maybe in the next or next to next classes. So now what happened within the formalist schools, there are many people, let's say, language use. Later on, we understood that there are many cases that language use cannot be ignored. And, and this is the discipline, if you remember, so people like William Labov and many people came into the picture. So within the formalist schools also, some people, uh, you know, uh, argued for the field like sociolinguistics, that yes, you cannot ignore language use, that kind of phenomena. And so, uh, so William Labov and many people, especially in sociolinguistics, William Labov, Joshua Fishman, I can name just one or two, but there are many, So, language and society, variety of language, dialectology, social grouping, speech community, and so the whole area of research in social linguistics. So many people started working in these formalist traditions as well. Okay, and so the functionalists have, on the other hand, functional linguistics, and so functional linguists will look at language as the means of communications, the purposes it fulfills, and how people actually use their language. So as I already told you, the language use, and for that. So it is performance, for us, especially the performance. And within the concern of applied linguistics, so many people, let's say, corpus linguistics is one really interesting. And within computational linguistics, I think last class someone was telling that 2 or 3 persons are really interested in computational linguistics. And so here also the corpus linguistics, one of my friend, professor and head of ISI Kolkata, Professor Niladri Shekhar Das, so he works on this, as well as CL Assistant Director Dr. Narayan Chaudhary. He's also one of the experts in corpus linguistics, and also our colleague from JNU, especially expert in Sanskrit and Sanskrit Corpora, for that matter. Computational linguistics, Professor Girish Jha. So I think you are doing his course, and I think that would be really helpful for you, those who have really, that kind of interest in computational linguistics. So the vast data banks of words and actual language use, word frequencies and combinations, so may not be revealed by intuition. There are many things. Let's say you say that our data source is our intuition, and definitely intuition is, to some extent, is good, but so corpus linguist, they'll say that yes, from the data source we can have lots of things, and what frequencies, when you can talk about the word frequencies, and it's also combinations, and there are many things which cannot be revealed by our intuition, the kind of intuition what we are talking about. See, so this is where the applied linguistics and more relevant to the concern of applied linguistics. Some of the things, just I mentioned some of these things, and now coming to this whole the kind of distinction between theoretical linguistics and applied linguistics. Can we make that kind of strict distinction between theoretical linguistics and applied linguistics? Let's say I'm applied linguistics. Do I need to know theoretical linguistics? Without theoretical linguistics, I can do, maybe do applied linguistics. But do I need to know both, especially? So, and if you have already understood the concept or definitions, we are always talking about the synthesis. So it's always better to know linguistics, or whatever the theory, and you try to apply those theories. So it is good, and as a result, many people, let's say whether it's computer programmers, or the people who are working in education sector, they come to linguistics, try to know the basics of linguistics, and then whichever the theory they try to apply, in those theory, and So it's a kind of a symbiotic relationship at times we see, and even theoretical linguistics also, uh, you know, got or gets many things from applied linguistics. Let's say you propose a certain theory, and your theory, whatever you have proposed, there is no practical use, no practical purpose. Then what is the use of theory? So, so this part we'll try to discuss. Huh? So now trying to theoretical linguistics, as we have already discussed, that is abstraction, idealization of language, and total abstraction, going back to your intuition, your mind, and here uh, your competence part, and as a result, detaching language from the experience of its use. So you're detaching language from the experience of its use, and linguistics, especially linguistics, and I think this is where I think you were aware of three types of adequacy and um, uh, observational adequacy, descriptive adequacy, explanatory adequacy, three types of adequacy. And so if you're aware of these three types of adequacy, I think, and you have also done course, I think basic course in syntax, and we talk about this in the very beginning level. So can you just, one of you simply tell me what are this observational adequacy, descriptive adequacy, explanatory adequacy? What is this? Can one of you simply tell me? You can unmute yourself and just.
Uh, Sir, I remember these are the three types of adequacy which
Who
Chomsky
is
has
this? Just
given.
can you just change it?
Sir, sir,
I
this is
cannot.
Shivam Kumar, sir.
Shivam, yes, Shivam, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, these three adequacy is being given by Chomsky. Observational adequacy deals with only the observational part of the informant, and descriptive adequacy deals with the I think uh, the second generation. I mean, or mm, or the old persons of old informants, and explanatory adequacy deals with the upcoming generation or the children who are going to be the next speaker of that language. I don't remember
Okay.
clearly. It's
Okay, so you are partially right, Shivam, but yes, I'll explain. But before that, can anyone else explain this thing? What this adequacy is all about? Do not type in the Google. This is very bad as well. What is this observational adequacy, descriptive adequacy, and explanatory adequacy? Anyone? The whole class is like there are more than 30 students joined, and don't tell
So,
me you don't know. Yes,
we didn't deal with any of this in our previous courses, so we don't know.
you don't know. Who is this?
Raju.
Okay. Anyone? I'm sure you. There's maybe.
Sir, I remember a little about explanatory
Mhm.
adequacy, and it talks about the intuitive level, the innate intuitive level of a native speaker. So there are certain things that we cannot observe, or there are certain things we cannot like look at the patterns and come up quickly as we can do with descriptive adequacy. But explanatory adequacy is something that natives have about their language, mm, where they can figure out whether something is right or wrong intuitively.
Okay. Who is this? Could you just
Sir Parul.
Parul? Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Parul. To some extent, you're right. Anyone else? So this is what I call class participation, and my memory is very sharp. I shouldn't say that my memory is sharp, but I do remember. You see, who interacts, who doesn't interact, and so for me, class participation is not only just you're logged in and just Class participation is if you're interacting in the class. That is what is class participation, and you will be graded accordingly. So in my course, there are, 10% is for CP, class participation. So please, if you're listening, I would like to hear from you. So only 3% responded so far. Okay. Anyway, so now if you look at the line here, so linguistics or linguist, their purpose is to describe and explain. Huh? And I just listed 3 types of adequacy. One is observational adequacy, descriptive adequacy, and explanatory adequacy. So the whole linguistics, let's say, and especially in the structural paradigm. So the Chomskyan paradigm, if you're talking about the Chomskyan paradigm, it's mainly the mentalist paradigm. So we are trying to look at language somewhere in the mind, somewhere in the brain. Huh? Earlier, before Chomsky, the whole structuralist paradigm, if you talk about, so what is the goal of linguistics or language expert? Is something like to observe language, or to describe, or to explain, So this observational adequacy will mainly based on observation. Based on observation, they description, then try to make kind of description of that whatever the observation was given, whatever they have observed so far. So that is, so the whole structuralist thoughts were dominated by observational adequacy and descriptive adequacy. So later on in the mentalist tradition, or in the genetic tradition, what we had seen that Chomsky came one step further, that observational and description is not enough. You need to make explanation, and here you need to come in the case of LAD, language acquisition. So language acquisition has to be accounted for. How children they acquire language, that part has to be accounted for. So if you're talking about explanatory adequacy, so you are also talking about language acquisition. So, and also going to look at the intuition part as well, So Shivam, you are right when you are talking about initially, and child language and all. So if you're talking about explanatory adequacy, so one thing is added, how the children, they do acquire language. So somewhere the whole theoretical linguistics, the formalist traditions, if we're talking about, as I already told you, abstraction, idealization of language, detaching language from the experience of its use, and even if it is not generative linguistics, mainly they are concerned with description, explanation, or observation and description, and then in explanatory adequacy, it is mainly explanation, and one step further is that how particularly children they acquire language, and that is the whole how language is there in our mind or brain, So this part is theoretical linguistics, and within the theoretical linguistics, you can, as you are a student of linguistics, you know it very well. Within phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics and all, the formalist traditions, the theory, So I can talk about those theory, whether it's phonological theory, morphological theory, and syntactic theory. I can talk about which are these traditions. But anyway, so this will dominate, in theoretical linguistics. Huh? Now, applied linguistics, on the other hand, applied linguistics engage with decision making. So the real world problem. So whether it is, I think I told you in the last class that you have a problem. What should be the mother tongue should be selected, especially you have problem, which language to be selected. If you're a teacher or if you're a language educator, so maybe you try to solve the problem, So engage with decision making, mediation between abstract analysis and real language experience of everyday lives. So it's not only about the abstract analysis as well as language experience of everyday lives, you know. So you have to have it. So the kind of theory what you have learned so far, why not apply those theory? And you can report it back to the theoretical linguist that yes, your theory is not sufficient, you know. So, or maybe you can give a direction to the theoretical linguistics as well, you know. So it takes help from theoretical linguistics, make the theories relevant or irrelevant, whether the theories is relevant or irrelevant to the problem in hand. And it takes investigations and theorize of its own. So then it investigates, it takes investigations and theorize of its own, you know. So this is where applied linguistics. Now, now, if you are talking about theoretical linguistics, so linguistics following behind applied linguistics to respond to the practical questions applied linguistics raises, attempting to answer them, and by doing so, widening its range of coverage. So there are many theoretical linguists, let's say again, working with applied linguists, and as a result, they are not so narrow-minded. Let's say there are many theoretical linguists. Kind of blind by theory proposed by many formalists in the generative traditions. So they have, you know, kind of narrow prism in their mind, you know, something like the kind of Eurocentric approach, whatever Chomsky proposed, and you know, let's say Chomsky or Eurocentric approach. Why I'm saying the theory which is being proposed, and their real model is, let's say, English, and they propose the theory thinking about that yes, if this is happening in English, this movement or that movement, and this may, you know, happen in rest of the languages of the world. And we had seen that, exactly, we had seen that, you know. And there are many language universals which are proposed earlier. When we came across to large set of data from different African languages, different languages of the world, let's say, then language universals have to be revised. That's what I'm saying. Language universal have to be revised. So you should not have that kind of narrow-minded approach when you are. So there are many field linguists. Let's say field linguists, whether it's Bernard Comrie, you know, and many people at the same time theoretical linguistics, and they do other kind of real field linguist, and at the same time the widening is range of coverage, you know. So we can mutually learn from one another. I should not think that yes, I'm a theoretical linguist, I'm an armchair linguist, so what I know it is best, you know. So you should be very practical, you know, and applied linguists are meant basically practical people, you know, in a way. So and theoretical linguist, and this is where one of the research, many theoretical linguists started working on second language acquisition, you know, and they also widened their scope in second language acquisition, and that's what I was telling you, that sociolinguistics and language variation within this strong language use kind of phenomena, which was ignored in formalist traditions, but later on sociolinguistics, many people, let's say William Labov and others, you know, William Labov and others started working on this, and so these are some of the things. So the goal is somewhere in theoretical linguistics is distant, and on the other hand, applied linguistics is like very near, you know. So linguistics also needs to do the same and cannot isolate itself from the daily uses of language. So in our understanding, so linguistics, for that matter, theoretical linguist, let's say, so they also need to do the same and cannot isolate itself from the daily uses of language. So it's not only the formal structure, but they need to look at the functional structure as well, functional aspects of the language as well. Okay, so and this is our understanding that applied linguistics is the pole position. You understand what is the pole position, is the driving position. So applied linguistics can then be seen to be the driver, and we had seen that error analysis, especially in teaching of English as a foreign language, and critical discourse analysis for that matter, stylistics, and LSP, language for specific purposes. And this is where lots of data, lots of things were also incorporated in the theoretical linguistics. So many people got their insights from applied linguistic research, and they made their own theory. And translation study is also one of the thing, translation studies. And so as I was telling you that the goal here, earlier it was distant, but applied linguistics is like immediate, and applied linguistics is clearly multifactorial in that in addition to linguistics, it draws on other disciplines, psychology, sociology, education, politics. I think there are many other fields, so it draws on other disciplines, psychology, sociology, education, as well as from politics. Okay, so and there are many other disciplines. I think I'll talk about. So oh, just, there is a problem with this slide. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so in summary, what we have understood so far, that applied linguistics is a theorizing discipline. So there has to be a bridge, or in another word, marriage between theoretical understanding of language and the practical experiences. So the practical experiences, so whatever the theory and the action, so there has to be a bridge, mediation between this thing. And what we have understood is that applied linguistics is a wholly cross-disciplinary subject. It's not that this is a wholly cross-disciplinary subject. Okay. So applied linguistics is a theorizing rather than a theoretical discipline. So this is what our premise is, that is a theorizing rather than a theoretical discipline. Linguistics could be a theoretical discipline, but within linguistics, let's say applied linguistics, we're talking about is a theorizing discipline rather than a theoretical discipline. It takes theorizing approach to practical experiences in the language professions and in language use. So we have a theorizing approach to practical experiences in the language professions, and in language use. Okay. Now, why applied linguistics is a theorizing discipline, and there is a two-way relationship between theory and practice, and that's the whole understanding that there is a two-way relationship between theory and practice. And applied linguistics explores the professionals' experiences of the practitioners. Okay, and it also draws on theories from related disciplines. I told you education, psychology, even computer science, and many other. Okay, so and now if you look at this book, I'll share you this book with you, and maybe you can start reading. Davis Allen 2007, An Introduction to Applied Linguistics, and you see that it's from practice to theory. And on the other hand, if you look at from theory to practice in other theoretical discipline, but here in this case, the title itself, An Introduction to Applied Linguistics, from practice to theory. That's what we practice and then try to get into the theory. So this is where. So I'll be sharing this book with you. Maybe let's say next class, or maybe this today itself. This in the Google Classroom. This book. You can also start reading from this book as well. Okay. So so applied linguistics and the kind of approach we take. Applied linguistics always a critical, and applied must do is to take a critical approach. So to it, literature, so even if you're talking about language policy, politics, and problematize it, and in so doing abjure easy solutions and packaged remedies. So it's not like that, it's giving you kind of ready-made solution. So all these easy solutions, no, it's not a field that it's easily given that kind of easy solutions. Yes, we try to explore these things, and problematize the thing and then come up with some kind of remedies. It's not kind of packaged remedies. And why this is said that packaged remedies? Why I'm saying is that let's say related to language policy, language planning in the education sector, let's say. So what is successful in India? Let's say India is a multilingual country. What is successful, whatever the whether it's a 3 language formula or other kind of language policy, what we have taken into account, the same thing may not be successful or applicable in other country, or other places, and maybe within India also. So we need to make our own kind of understanding, and even if you're talking about some of the problems, people who are suffering in different kind of language disorders, and you say that yes, since he's suffering this language disorder, so we have this kind of solution for this, and then you give a package kind of solution or remedies. Not necessarily that this may not work, because language itself is different. What is working in language X, the same solution may not work in language Y. Try to talk about the writing system. Why I'm saying is that, let's say if you're talking about the writing system, the logographic writing system or alphabetic writing system or abugida writing system for that matter, let's say, or alphabetic writing system for that matter. So we had seen that there are many people who have lost their spoken skill after because of brain damage, but they haven't lost their let's say the written skill. Why is this so? Or maybe some people they know 2 script. Try to understand this. They know 2 script, how to read and write 2 scripts. So one of the script after brain damage is lost, but another script is there. Another script is there. Why is this so? So in the deeper level, if you try to understand, in the deeper level, because script is also that kind of alphabetic, logographic, I was telling you, alpha syllabic script. So in many cases, we have seen that maybe logographic script may retain in the brain. You never know. Or maybe the alphabetic script may retain in the brain, depending on which part of the brain is damaged. You never know. So the main thing what I am saying is that what is applicable in language X may not be applicable in language Y. So we should not give that kind of packaged remedies or easy solution for this and that. So rather try to we have to have a critical approach and try to problematize it, try to make kind of empirical research, and then try to solve the problem or language related problem. Okay, so applied linguistics is try to resolve language based problems that people encounter in the real world. It's trying to resolve language based problems that people encounter in the real world. So that's what I'm saying. So doing empirical research, you do have your theory, but at the same time making use of the theory, but try to do empirical research or pilot study, and then try to encounter the real world problem. So the really interesting case, let's say if you're talking about NEP, National Education Policy, so this mother tongue education, which is being proposed nowadays, mother language, home language, and all. So as an applied linguist, let's say we cannot make that kind of easy solution. Yes, make mother tongue education compulsory for all. As an applied linguist, we need to think about it. At least try to do that kind of experiment, that kind of empirical study or empirical research, and then come up with that kind of solutions. Okay, so this is where so what is applied linguistics in summary? So what is applied linguistics in summary? That's what applied linguistics is. Definitely it's an interdisciplinary drawing on a multitude of disciplines, including psychology, sociology, and language pedagogy. Pedagogy is mainly the language teaching part, as well as theoretical linguistics. Okay, so this is what we have understood: interdisciplinary, drawing on multitude of disciplines, including psychology, sociology, pedagogy, and as well as theoretical linguistics. Okay, so, and it's not limited to language teaching. What exactly started in somewhere in 1940s, started with language teaching or second language teaching for that matter, and not limited to language teaching, but included a broad range of fields, including lexicography. That's what lexicography, if you remember, lexicography is basically art of writing dictionary, compile dictionary, how to write, how to compile a dictionary, whether it's a monolingual dictionary, bilingual dictionary, or trilingual dictionary, or multilingual dictionary. And nowadays, so this even dictionary making is also so easy. Earlier, it was a very challenging task, very difficult task, and lexicography, stylistics, another field looking at language of literature, uh, language of literature, and within stylistics also, I can tell you the whole history of stylistics. We can discuss that later on, but stylistics initially started with literature. Uh, Literature, I'm talking about literature, let's say whether it is Shelley, Kit Byron's, whether it's a novel, poem, prose, drama, or something, all that kind of literary text and its analysis initially started with that, with whole this formalist schools there back there in Russia, and then but what we had seen that even stylistics has also widened its scope. It's not only about literary text; they have included non-literary text as well. So, so stylistics is one of the cases, and speech pathology. As I already told you, you are also aware of speech pathology, mainly that language disorder, whether it's aphasia, dyslexia, dysarthria, dysgraphia, and there are many other language-related problems, after the brain damage, or maybe there are some cases. These are acquired cases. The children are born with some cases, So, speech therapist or pathologist to try to solve those problems, and I think you must have seen that movie, especially the Hindi movie, the Tare Zameen Par, the character has a problem, especially in writing, and for him it was very difficult for him to write some of the characters, and all the characters alphabets for him it dances, So, but he's very bright child, and then after the introduction, that the teacher, Tare Zameen Par movie, this Amir Khan, he comes into picture, and then he understands the problem that the child is pretty well, he's smart, and then after that he can easily read and write, and because so something like speech pathology, speech therapy, and there are some people, they have also problems in let's say pronunciation and all, so how to so they also try to give that kind of training also, and so translation is another one, language policy and planning, among others, language policy and planning, and so these are some of the things what we have moved so far if we're talking about applied linguistics, and so performed a mediating function between theory and practice, Buckingham and Esky, and mediating function between theory and practice, and so that's what synthesis of between theoretical linguistics and practical things. I think we have already spoken this thing, and so and Corder and Sridhar, one of the Indian linguists, very famous. So applied linguistics is a problem-based and brings linguistics insight and analysis to bear on practical issues of language use situated in time, place, and society, and culture. So this is where Corder and Sridhar is. So it's a problem-based. We understand that problem-based, real-world problem, and brings linguistic insight and analysis to bear on the practical issues of language use, situated in time, place, society, and culture. Sridhar, 1993. So, so applied linguistics and their interactions with other experts of the field, and so these are some of the things. If you are applied linguist, I think, as I already told you, that you need to interact with other experts in the field, and this is where some of the applied linguists work closely with professionals in other disciplines such as psychology, sociology, anthropology, and education. You have to let's say interact with this psychology, sociology, anthropology, education. I think one of our student, I think Parul Bharadwaj, she has interest, especially she was education, and then that came to linguistics. So you have to have that kind of interaction with other professionals. You see, and an applied linguist who is a teacher trainer, let's say, for example, must draw not only on the field of linguistics but also on the fields of education and psychology. So if you're a teacher trainer, so you have to have inputs from education and psychology as well, and education and psychology, and I know many people from our department also. There are many teacher trainer, and not only teacher trainer, and so one of our student, he trains many employees, Google, who's working on Google, and especially how to write all that kind of emails, and so he has worked on his. Now he's a faculty back there in IM. I think I am Shillong. Yes, he joined in Shillong. Now I think he has come to Lucknow. Yes. So so somewhere training teacher also, and how to write business emails, how to respond business emails, and all that kind of things, So if you are a teacher trainer, you have to have that kind of background of education and as well as psychology. And applied linguists working on language problems associated with immigrant and refugee concerns must perforce be familiar with social and political factors that will influence language use. You see, so so especially immigrant and refugee concerns. So you have to aware of the social and political factors. What are the social and political factors that will influence language use? So in many cases, especially India, let's say, if you're talking about India, case of India, and you had seen that how, let's say, if you push one language, and as a result, maybe another community, they may not like it, that why their language is introduced in the education, let's say, whether in the school education or college education, but why not our language? So there has certain kind of some kind of things, social and political scenario you have to be aware of, so what to impose, what not to impose. So and I can tell you cases like Bengal, and as a result, let's say Bengali is being imposed. Definitely Bengali, especially in Bengal, is the language, the state language, dominant language. But if you are imposing it to somewhere, the Nepali community back there in Darjeeling, they're definitely going to refuse it, let's say, because so especially in the school curriculum, so you have to have an option, either Nepali or Bangla. So you have to have that kind of option. So once it is being imposed, and as a result, there's an uproar in the community. It's a huge uproar, the why Bengali is being imposed, and we had seen that kind of uproar in different nook and corner of the country when this language is imposed, whether it's a state language or maybe Indian, some kind of official language, and we know that there are many cases, let's say in South India also, if at times what happens if Hindi is being imposed, and strong opposition from either from Tamil Nadu or other parts of the India also. So 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 you have to be aware of different kind of social and political factors, you see. And somehow Bengal, if you look at Bengal, and that is where the dark age, I definitely say it's a dark age, especially the communist government back in somewhere in after 1990s. What they have done, that they have removed English from primary education, and English was introduced after class 5. English was introduced in class 6. So from class 1 to class 5, there was no English. English was not taught. So, and it continued for many years. But on the other hand, if you look at all this, in my understanding, all these political leaders, they say that yes, go for mother tongue education, that education and that education. On the other hand, in the practical level, what happens? These are the people, they will be sending their children to those English medium schools, or maybe not only in English medium schools in India, or maybe they will be sending their children to abroad, So what I'm saying is that somewhere there are lots of political games, game is going on in the country, and not only in the country, in other parts of the world also. So you have to be aware of different kind of problems, what kind of problems is going on, and then accordingly you have to give a solution, So applied linguists working in institutional settings such as healthcare or law need working knowledge of the terminology, traditions, and practices of those institutions. So anyway, so even many people working in this institutional settings such as healthcare or law, so the legal terminology. So you need to be aware of this legal terminology, the traditions and practitioners of this institute. So there are many things we need to interact with. Just few I have noted down. At the same time, let's say if you're talking about computational linguistics, let's say, so you have to be aware of this computer science. And okay, so so somewhere and we'll continue our lecture, let's say the next class as well. So what is our essential areas of inquiry, the scope of linguistics? I think you have already read chapter 1 and chapter 2, that these are some of the scope essential areas of inquiry. So the field now includes work in the general areas of cross-cultural pragmatics. Also, it's expanded, cross-cultural pragmatics, psycholinguistics, language acquisition, not only language acquisition, even second language acquisition we'll talk about, socialization, language for specific purposes, literacy, language policy and planning, sociolinguistics, discourse analysis, rhetoric and stylistics, translation and interpretation. So these are some of the essential areas of inquiry if you're talking about applied linguistics. And these areas are in addition to the more traditional areas concerned: second language pedagogy, mainly second language teaching, language assessment, second language acquisition, language assessment. There is a module, I think, unit language assessment. We'll talk about language assessment also in detail, how to assess a particular course or particular subject. What is the evaluation criteria? How do you evaluate? Let's say evaluate a teacher for that matter. Generally, what is happening? We evaluate student. Let's say how even students evaluate a teacher. What are the criteria? Let's say, so what kind of assessment? So you must have heard about this different team, NAG also. They assess different university, different colleges and give a rank, A++, B+ or something. JNU comes somewhere on A++, top out of 4. So JNU gets somewhere around 4 or 3.9 plus, so it's A++ status, NAC. So what kind of assessment criteria? And assessment and second language acquisition and bilingualism also, bilingual education, bilingual, the word bilingual, when we talk about bilingual, mainly we talk about multilingual, because this is the term used, both the terms is used, bilingual and multilingual, so multilingual education. And in many cases, we have also introduced this mother language education. MLE, the program of MLE is introduced in different parts of India, mainly in Odisha also. Our colleague Minati Panda, as well as this Mohanty, Ajit Kumar Mohanty, and there are many people, So they proposed to this MLE, mother language education, and which is really successful model, especially, So there are many essential areas of inquiry in applied linguistics. So just mentioning some of the things. So in other words, the questions that applied linguistics seek to answer range over a multitude of disciplines and real world settings. Okay, so now multitude of disciplines, as I already mentioned, is a cross-discipline subject and real world settings. Okay, so these are some of the things, essential areas of inquiry, and so next class, I think I have already told you in the next class to read I think chapter, I don't know whether you remember it or not, and also send you a module by Gargesh, not Gargesh, this is by Agnihatri.
Rajesh.
Yeah, Rajesh Kumar and R.K. Agnihatri. Please do read that, and as well as chapter 1. So next class, which will be on Monday, so I'll try to discuss those things and again continue our discussion in the next class. So this is something, so I tried to give you this kind of overview, and so one thing I told you that there is a kind of a what I should say, that distinction between linguistics and applied linguistics, applied and applied linguistics, you see. And earlier, and so many people they made that kind of distinction, that linguistics applied and applied linguistics. Earlier, somewhere around 1960s and 1970s, it continued, but later on, many people, they feel that there is no need to make that kind of distinction, And Alan Davis, he himself, in his book, he mentioned it categorically, because earlier maybe there was a need to make a distinction, linguistics applied and applied linguistics, because that time scope of linguistics was very, very narrow, Only some of the things, only language teaching, speech therapy and translation were looked into. Now the kind of scope and horizon of applied linguistics is words. So you cannot make that kind of distinction now. Linguistics applied is like so narrow to some extent, and because applied linguistics, there are many other disciplines which are coming into picture. Okay, so earlier there is a distinction between linguistics applied and applied linguistics. It is not necessary as it may once have been, earlier. Okay, so so this is where if you have this, that kind of questions in your mind, so just trying to clear that question as well, because last time somebody asked me that question. That's what I thought of telling you, that okay, so there is no such distinctions we make, because applied linguistics now is a kind of huge kind of words kind of field, Okay. So so this is so in general, so today we talked about some kind of definitions, and as well as little bit of distinction between linguistics and theoretical linguistics and applied linguistics, and yeah, so maybe also kind of overview of essential areas of inquiry of applied linguistics. Okay, so we'll continue our discussion in the next class, and before that, before I end the lecture, let's say the class as well, if you have any question, any doubt, let's say regarding